welcome once again to the Cine-Files. My name is Steve Morris. I am a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hey, hello everyone. My name is John Roca. I'm a writer, producer, and host here on the Outlaw Nation and co-host of the Cine-Files and voiceover guy, and excited to get into our 200th episode, Steve. My God, I did not know or did not think we were going to get here ever, and it's been amazing to be here now at the 200th episode.
Well, and we're celebrating this 200th episode by doing something we have never done before, which is the Cine-Files is on camera. So if you are listening to us in our regular audio feed on the podcast, thank you so much. We hope you enjoy it, but you can actually watch this video and see the faces of not only John and I, but all of our favorite guests. And we're even going to be visited by some of our most important fans and supporters of the Cine-Files on Patreon.
Because without you all who are the fans, there's no way the show gets to 200 episodes. So thank you. And it'll be exciting for you all to revisit and spend some more time with some of our best guests who've ever been on the show.
And to start off, I think we're going to go way back in time to long before the beginning of the Cine-Files, long before we ever had an idea of doing a podcast. And we're going to go to a strange dive sports bar in Hollywood called Big Wang's to find out how the Cine-Files came into existence.
Do I think there's a connection between Big Wang's, the Cine-Files, and even the Geek Buddies? 100%.
I don't think there is a Cine-Files without Big Wang's.
Big Wang's is a place here that used to be here in Los Angeles. It was a sports bar, great tater tots.
Like, we have this intellectual, deep, complicated show that can't possibly exist without this divey sports bar in the middle of Hollywood.
And it's just about 2 blocks away from ArcLight Cinemas and the Cinerama Dome. So it kind of makes it the ideal spot to go for a drink and some boneless spicy chicken wings after a night at the movies.
Great chicken wings.
As long as we went to Big Wang's, we were always talking about movies.
And chugging down a drink, which I kid you not, is called a wang banger.
Go to Big Wang's, do some wang bangers, which is the signature shot.
A wang banger is one of those things where it's a shot glass that you drop into, another drink. Like, I don't know what was in it.
It had like Southern Comfort and vodka and orange juice and some sort of, probably Red Bull, some sort of energy drink.
And basically get super drunk, have chicken wings, and then yell and argue about movies.
For the crew of us out here in Los Angeles, and Steve Morris and I being part of this crew, and numerous guests of the Cine-Files, it was a place we'd go to after a movie.
And there's something that, like, my little gay soul just loved about being in the middle of a sports bar where everybody else was watching some kind of sporting event and we were arguing about who would beat someone in a fight, Batman versus Superman, or what they could have done to make The Hangover that much of a better, funnier movie.
I think maybe if we had been able to record some of those conversations, we could maybe have some great ideas, or maybe the ideas could be terrible. The memories are a little fuzzy.
And I came to think of this weird sports bar as like a magical place.
It was a very special place for our group of friends in that time.
And I think we just kind of threw around this idea of, wouldn't it be fun to take this conversation and turn it into a podcast?
We came up with an idea for a show called I Don't Know, What Do You Think?
John's talked about the origin of the Cine-Files a whole bunch of times, and he always brings up this I Don't Know, What Do You Think show with Jonathan Blue. I never liked that idea.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I didn't know that. All right, I'll file that away in my brain as something to remember when Steve gives you that smile, that knowing smile that maybe he doesn't 100% feel the idea you're pitching him. But we eventually found our way to the Cine-Files, so even if you didn't like the idea, it paved the way for an even better idea.
Look, I am who I am. I am terrible at small talk. I'm not that interested in ephemera. So even though we talked about certain podcast ideas during those great conversations at Big Wang's, to me, it was like, how can we do something that's different and substantial?
Yeah, that's Steve to a T. Everything has to always be substantial and mean so much. And I just wanted to hang out together and talk about movies. And of course, in the end, that's what we eventually got to. And I think it has been substantial ever since.
Part of the origins of the Cine-Files, frankly, comes out of my depression. I made this film, The Assistants. I'm super proud of it. It did really well in festivals. And then because of a totally unscrupulous salesperson who just basically lied to us and never tried to sell the film, it just died. And what was so horrible about it is that it's not that it didn't succeed because it's a bad film, in my opinion. I think it's a good film. But we just couldn't get it to the audience. And then I made this Great White Shark film.
Mike Hoover has spent much of the last decade filming the great whites. And while his intention is to demystify the animal, the realities of the entertainment industry have put him in an almost impossible position. You see, there's only one real way to sell a shark show: teeth.
So we had this huge sale in Europe. It was seen by millions of people, but I couldn't get it to play in my own country. And I was just really bummed. And I was going like, well, what am I going to do? And I was a huge fan of John in the Top 10 show.
It was so great that Steve became one of the first fans who were my friends. Not that my other friends weren't supportive, but Steve made time. At a time when I was still building my confidence in what I was doing, it was great to know that a person whose opinion I respect was actually listening and appreciating what we were doing on the show.
And let's be real clear. No, I didn't have any followers on Twitter. Nobody was interested in coming to hear what Steve Morris had to say, but they were interested in coming to hear what the Outlaw had to say. And there was no question in my mind that I was going to use my good friend John's popularity to help launch the show. Now, that doesn't mean I did it just for that reason. I knew he was good. I had listened to him many, many times on Top 10 Show. And of course, I'd had all these great conversations with him at Big Wang's and other places talking about film.
And for me, it was so different than everything else I've been doing, because I was doing these recap shows and I was doing, shows about movies. The Top 10 Show was about movies, but counting them down.
And I think the very first choice that was really important was to make sure that the movies had stood the test of time, which became our 10-year rule.
This was a chance to really sit down with one movie and dissect it and dive into it and talk about the themes and everything else. And that satisfied me as a student of film, as a lover of film. I felt like this show could be different. And it did become completely different from anything else I was doing. And I've always cherished that.
The evolution of the Cine-Files is really, really clear. Partially it's because I spent so much time editing the shows, and I know when I made changes.
It's funny. The first few episodes of the Cine-Files, if people go back and listen to them, they're an hour long, an hour and a half, just conversations about the movie.
And in my opinion, our first good episode is Amadeus.
Yeah, Amadeus was the one. Amadeus, for whatever reason, that's the one that clicked.
Something clicked when we did Amadeus, and it was where we figured out that we could talk more deeply about film.
And I remember that was the episode where I saw for the first time what the show had the possibility to be.
When I was editing Amadeus, I kept hearing that opening classical Mozart music. We have our kind of fun Cine-Files music, and that's how we opened every show. And Amadeus, I was like, I can't open the show with that music. I have to open it with Mozart.
I remember the first time I put Amadeus on in the car, our episode, and I heard that opening clip of the song. And I immediately lost my mind in that moment because I thought it was so brilliant to do that. And it immediately separated this show from anything I was doing at the time or would do later. And ever since, he started every show with either a clip from a scene in the movie or a song or something from the score or the soundtrack that immediately puts you in the vibe of the film. And we've got you at that point, and you're with us on this ride in the Cine-Files.
I started to hear, rather than hearing me say a line or John say a line, I was like, well, if we're talking about this thing, I want to hear the line. If we say this person's performance is great, well, I want to hear the great performance.
And music. Finished as no music is ever finished. Displace one note, and there would be diminishment. Displace one phrase, and the structure would fall.
If we say this music cue in a film is really powerful, well, I wanted to hear the music cue. There is a string quartet that's playing at the party.
Yeah.
And they're playing all sorts of classical music. When Hans is coming up the elevator and we come first to the party and they enter, what piece of music are they playing? They're playing Ode to Joy.
Wow.
When Hans is in the elevator with Takagi and he's humming, what is he humming? humming Ode to Joy. The next big one, I think, was The Shining, and that's where John and I think, started pushing each other.
That was when I first started to understand that I could play within the parameters of the show and start to challenge Steve. And his surprise was great, because you can rarely catch Steve. You rarely catch him out. And when you can, it's a fun conversation usually.
I want to ask you about The Shining. Do you believe in this kind of thing? Do you think this thing is possible? Obviously, with this ESP, people who are psychics, that kind of jazz. Do you think this is possible? The communication between mental energies without speaking.
I did not expect to be answering this question. The really good episodes are ones where we have conversations beyond the film. Apocalypse Now was a huge episode because it was such a mess.
Before then, our episodes were very much jumping around the movie.
Like we'd be in this scene, then we'd jump to a scene at the end, then we'd have to later on think of a thing that we hadn't said about the scene earlier, and then we'd jump back. And it was that episode that made me start to go, oh, we should talk about this in some kind of chronological order.
And I just love reliving the film as you guys discuss it. It's almost as enjoyable as watching the film itself.
That's when the Cine-Files really took shape. And it was born out of this feeling that there was more to talk about, and if we had a regimented approach to the show, then we'd be able to talk about everything we want to talk about with the movie, because it would come up organically as these scenes were presented. West Side Story.
And then we did West Side Story. I don't remember what was going on in my life, but I just wasn't on the ball.
That one was an incredible episode to be a part of, because we brought in two incredibly talented and knowledgeable people about music and about musicals, like David Cornu and Milena Govic, and had them break down the songs and the dances and the choreography and how it mirrored. For a man who loves this movie, because it speaks to me as a lover of musicals, but also because you've got Latinos represented in this movie in a powerful way, it was a whole new way to appreciate the film.
And again, the episode, which I think it's a really good episode, really hard to edit. And that's where I started to go, okay, I need to write down every single thing that happens in the movie. Otherwise, it's going to be a mess.
West Side Story, it has brilliant music, it's brilliant story, it's brilliant writing, it's brilliant choreography. Together, they all transcend all those individual genres.
When Scott Mantz came on the Cine-Files to do Wrath of Khan, I think that is a watershed moment in the show.
Guys, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here to talk about the one thing that I love talking about more than anything.
Really?
And that is you, Rocha.
What? No!
You!
Having Scott Mantz take the time and the chance on a fledgling podcast like ours, because of our friendship, meant so much to me.
I felt like these guys were kindred spirits to me. And I could have gone on for 5 hours instead of 3, because I loved how committed they were to doing a deep dive into a film, scene by scene, moment by moment.
It was no longer a podcast or an episode. We became those nerdy kids who are 12 years old in their parents' basement, just talking about the love of something that they are super deep into.
Hey guys, this is Todd from Maine, and I'm here to talk about my favorite episode of the Cine-Files, which is the episode on the Wrath of Khan. I'm super biased because I've loved this movie as long as I can remember. And that's kind of why this episode is so special to me. It feels the most like a conversation that I would have with my dad.
That's the gift of Scott Mantz. Scott Mantz can make you feel like you've been friends with him for 30 years.
What I remember when I left was, I really hope they asked me back.
Star Trek.
Star Trek 2.
Star Trek 2.
The Wrath of Khan.
The Wrath of Khan, which is, as we all know, widely hailed as the greatest Star Trek movie of them all.
Absolutely.
The Citizen Kane of Star Trek movies.
Then we did the month of Kane.
Maybe one of the greatest months of my life. No lie.
First of all, it created this tradition, which is the first month of every new year, we're going to focus on a director and do a deep dive into their work.
I love Orson Welles so much, and being able to share it with Steve and talk about it with Steve, who's also a massive Orson Welles fan, was so satisfying. And it's like satisfying a thirst.
It's the first time we split a movie into 2 parts because it wasn't possible to fit it all in one. And we were really scared that the audience would reject that.
I had a strange confidence about it that it wouldn't be an issue, because I think once you do something really well, people will come back for it. And you leave them wanting more. That's the number one thing of an entertainer. And one lesson you learn is to always leave them wanting more.
And so that's what sort of freed us up to do these bigger episodes, was like, oh, people are actually okay with doing 3 hours of conversation about a 2-hour film. Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore its themes. We enter the... I don't know, man.
What's going on?
I don't know. Do we enter a world of a great film?
Yes, we are entering the world of a great film.
Is that what we're doing today?
Yes, we are doing that today.
You want to tell them what the movie is?
Yes. Welcome, everybody. Well, first, that's Steve Morris. I'm John Roca, and we are talking about Armageddon today.
Woo, baby. Armageddon. That was the one.
Armageddon is the first movie we did where we felt really differently about it, and it ended up being one of the most fun episodes we ever did.
Steve was like, well, let's tackle a film that maybe isn't the greatest film or what have you. And I was like, it is the greatest film.
And to be really clear, and I hope people know this, I actually like Armageddon.
Wait, Steve actually likes Armageddon now?
I think there's some issues that need to be discussed about it.
There are no issues with that film. I don't know what he's talking about.
I would say after that, there are two more really transformative films that we did. One was when we did the Civil War documentary.
That changed our show. That changed our show.
That challenged me in terms of how to put it together and totally changed the way I edited.
I have never felt the sense of responsibility to getting an episode right more than I did for the Civil War, because I love that documentary as much as Steve does, but it's also a very important documentary about our country's history. And I felt it was maybe the most important episode we've done in a very, very long time.
I want the show to be an interesting conversation. And what I learned from the Civil War and Apollo 13 was skip the boring parts. Jump ahead to a new cut. Let the cut propel us forward.
It'll be the worst disaster NASA's ever experienced.
With all due respect, sir, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
For me, sometimes our best episodes are not from the best films. As part of a Guilty Pleasure series, we did Zorro the Gay Blade.
2 fruits, 1 vegetable, and a fruit salad.
Which is one of John's absolutely favorite movies from a certain era in his life. He loves it. I do not. The conversation we had for that episode is one of my favorites.
That's one of the surprising things about the show. You never know what you're going to discover. Something where you think might be lightweight or might not have too much, too much depth to it. All of a sudden you discover there's a lot more bubbling underneath the surface.
That movie led us to get into things that I think we never would have gotten into without that film.
You know, I take a certain amount of pride that coming out of that episode, Steve was a little worried about doing it. And by the end of it, felt that we had a fantastic episode and great discussions that were born from what is a funny, frivolous take on Zorro that walks the line, but in the end is a positive film.
Obviously, you have a well-established Latino identity, but I also think that your love for this film shows a deep, deep affection for a certain kind of Catskills Jewish humor.
Oh, yes.
And I think I might give you the title of Honorary Jew.
I don't know what to say. I am super honored about that.
And I know a lot of people who watch the Cine-Files, they watch it by looking through the list, picking a film that they love and listening to it. And if you see a film maybe that you never saw, aren't interested in, you skip it. Some of those might be our best episodes.
I think one of the things that's great about Cine-Files, and one of the things that actually inspired me and John and Shannon to go do Geek Buddies, is the ability to bring your friends in and have them weigh in on their opinions. It takes this family of people who all love cinema and then expands it out to all the other great guests they've had.
I know this is going to sound strange. I think Mike Vogel is the most like me guest we have on the show.
As John and Shannon will tell you on the Geek Buddies, I pretty much love listening to myself talk, so definitely my favorite episodes of the Cine-Files are the ones where I'm a guest.
We have to hold on because Mike will run away with the show.
Because he has a tendency, I won't say to take over.
Maybe don't try to drive every time. Just saying. Go ahead, Steve. As you were saying, Steve.
Maybe take that out.
Oh, yeah.
No, leave it in.
You know what?
Leave it in.
Yeah, leave it in. You know what? Leave it in.
I'll be leaving that in.
It's always a blast to have him on the show, and he loves doing the show, which makes us enjoy doing the show even more.
I've often been asked, did you go to film school? And I said, yeah, I went to film school every weekend.
But gentlemen, the movie is called Blade Runner. You think the movie's about Harrison Ford? You think the movie is about Deckard? The movie Blade Runner is about Gaff.
Listen to this.
Okay, hold on.
This is a controversial statement.
The movie Blade Runner is about Edward James Olmos.
What?
Gaff is the Blade Runner.
The thing about Mantz is that he brings such a joy to doing our show that humbles me, because Scott is one of the greatest reviewers of films, one of the most knowledgeable and one of the most well-known. And for him to speak honestly and authentically about his experiences with us and how much joy he has in breaking down a film with us, to me, humbles me, because it makes me know that we're doing something really good.
The main thing I'm looking for in an entertaining movie is not to think about how they made it. After their first table read, some assistant had gone up to Eric Stoltz and was saying, hey, this movie's going to be really great. It's going to be really, really funny. And he goes, oh, I don't think this is going to be funny at all.
Oh,
this
really?
This is tragic. He's going to go back to a life that didn't exist. And that was his...
That was in his head.
That was his way in, yeah.
The first time Shannon McClung came on the show, I think he was nervous.
The main feeling I get, even now, coming on to the Cine-Files as a guest, is intimidation.
Shannon's a very deft listener. Shannon can sit for an hour and listen to us talk.
And when John and I are talking, I mean, obviously with 200 episodes, we can talk a blue streak.
And this is what happens when we talk about movies at bars afterwards. We'll talk about how much we loved it, and then the critical thinking starts, and I'll just sit there with my mouth open, being like, God, I did not think about that at all. And some things I agree with, and some things I don't.
And then he'll chime in with something really unique and interesting and brilliant. And we're both just kind of taken aback for a moment, because we've been talking for so long.
And then in Back to the Future, which is, by the way, might be the funniest episodes of the Cine-Files of all time,
but not as good as Perfect Strangers.
No, Perfect Strangers is the best theme.
That's the best theme song from the 80s,
Absolutely.
period.
Gentlemen.
Yeah.
Standing tall on the wings of my dreams,
rise and fall
on the wings of my dreams. And the best part, through rain and thunder, wind and haze, I'm bound for better days.
And that's what's great about Shannon. Shannon doesn't have the ego that he needs to be involved. He needs to be jumping in at every moment that he can.
When Shannon jumps in and commits himself, he is awesome.
I went to Ferris Bueller's Day Off and came out of that movie, and all of my friends were like, oh my God, that's you. You're Ferris. And I was like, no, that's not me. And being like, yeah, that's me.
Who would have taken the time to, by yourself, somehow yank up a body? Were there ropes? What did he do? Yeah. I don't know what he did. Yeah. He did it with the banners, and yet it's such a great visual, and you've built up so much credit with me. I'm like, yes, okay. Because this is a man who's been dying of thirst forever, and he finally gets to the water, and he's like,
he takes a big drink.
I am taking the biggest drink.
Something you would never know from listening to Dave Rapp on the Cine-Files is that he has stage fright.
I get very anxious and nervous. I have stage fright that's been pretty bad ever since I was a little kid.
We both respect Dave. Dave's literally a rocket scientist, an incredibly brilliant guy.
And he brings so much intelligence and enthusiasm to every episode we do.
And Dave has such a deference to our show that is so sweet.
I can remember seeing an ad for Star Wars on TV where Luke Skywalker is wrestling with a sand person. And I remember in my tiny child brain, I thought he was wrestling with the Statue of Liberty. And it reminded me of the end of Planet of the Apes, which I think I'd seen on TV at that point. And then in my brain, it's just like, is all science fiction somehow related to the Statue of Liberty?
All of George Miller's films, but particularly The Road Warrior, it is such an example of the rule of thirds. So often there are two things going on in the frame, and usually someone's in the foreground and someone's in the background, but because of the lens he's using, they're both in focus. It's almost like he's telling the story left to right.
So I've been having conversations about movies with Steve Jones since high school.
I am truly a geek.
basically, we consider our friendship to just be a one long 30-year conversation.
I think being a geek is unabashedly loving something to the degree that you don't care how it makes you look. If I love a friend, I love them unabashedly and unreservedly. If I love a person, it's the same way. My children, like, I don't really believe in trying to look cool when it comes to the things that I love.
And so having him come on the Cinephiles, to me, is just like an extension of what we've been doing since we were kids.
Like, hello, Twister. What did I learn from Twister? Don't chase a tornado. And that can be a metaphorical tornado. That can be an actual tornado. Like, these are things that you have to learn.
Every night before we went to bed, he had to talk to me and then be like, I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. But nothing. Friend zoned so hard.
Oh,
and I'm a girl.
Yeah.
I have Willy Wonka's golden ticket to the fuck factory, a vagina. And I could not.
Someone make that a shirt. I think Sasha Perl Raver is one of the best guests we've had on the show.
I think it's always just been something where perhaps my passion was a little too unbridled.
And all the walls are down, and we're talking about the nuttiest, craziest things.
That's what's so great about the Cinephiles, is that we can have a great conversation about complicated issues based on what's happening in the film, and Sasha was just the best for that.
I think we talked about anal sex with Sasha Perl Raver, so whoever thought we'd talk about that on a episode where we break down a film.
I'm never getting on this show. I'm just going to have to look at it from the back. That's fine. I'll look at it from the back row. I'll just be a fan.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cinephiles, where we have survived stomach viruses, sick kids, difficult travel plans, stressful holiday parties, and New Year's Eve, and
oh my God, nobody survived.
Jesus,
what is wrong with you?
Michael Ross.
You missed one thing in my credits. Super fan of the Cine-Files.
He is calmly trying to have a conversation with us as we're careening to our deaths, Thelma and Louise style, and I love it.
Here we go. Oh.
It is the most challenging. It is the most funny. The most unpredictable.
Oh, no. It was a joke. No, it was a joke. Totally a joke.
I am never more alive doing a Cinephile show than I am with Mike Ross, because I have no idea what he's going to say, what to expect.
I sit you in that Clockwork Orange chair, and I'm just like...
We did Christmas Vacation. That show felt completely out of control. And then I listened to the show. That show is so funny.
How? Really? I'm like, oh, maybe I am a cinephile.
That's the thing as an artist, that if you can make one person feel anything close to that, I mean, you got to feel like you're doing something important.
I think this is all part of that same problem that we're dealing with, you know, the media taking place of journalism, you know, entertainment taking the place of news, sensationalism taking the place of truth.
I try to be objective as an editor and to really evaluate things for their quality, and I really think Karen was a great guest.
I enjoyed having Karen on the show. Well, A, because she's the other half of Steve Morris.
And those of you who listen to the show know that my conversations with Karen definitely inform what I say on the Cinephiles. Her opinion matters to me.
I think Karen is an essential part of the Cinephiles in a phantom way.
Quite frankly, she puts up with the bullshit of the Cinephiles in a way that is very generous and is not always very easy. So thank you, Karen.
And look, everyone's got that one movie that when they saw it, whether in a theater or at home, the one movie that got inside them and changed them and started them down that path of becoming a cinephile.
My dad, being a military man, he's not the most, he's not a cold guy, but he's not a sharer. We lived on the base. My father was in the Navy. So on all the bases, there's a little base, you know, Navy base theater. And I'd never been to the Navy theater. And I remember walking up the steps and thinking, where are we? And as we walked in, it was right at the beginning of the Battle of Hoth.
My dad took me and a friend of mine to go see the first Naked Gun.
Just going in and just being surrounded for like my, 5-6-year-old eyes, I was just enthralled.
It was like, I remember laughing. I remember becoming an adult in cinema.
And so suddenly I'm in the Battle of Hoth and I'm with my dad.
Naked Gun in particular was kind of like the first, like with my dad was like this. He trusts me, and I became a man. I understand this, you know?
Not only was I getting to see this movie that I had loved, but I was doing it with the most important guy in my life.
That's a pretty good memory for me.
E.T. in San Francisco.
I saw that movie 8.5 times in the theater.
That was probably the first time I ever experienced a movie as an event.
Seeing a film that had characters that were about my age, that I felt like reflected like this ultimate version of what my life could be if my best friend came down from space, and being able to connect so deeply with every single character on screen. And that was really, I feel like, the first moment where everything changed.
One of the first movies that I remember loving was a movie that made me feel like there was more going on, that there could be more. And it's as dorky as it is, it's The Wizard of Oz.
My parents took me to movies all the time, but I think the first time that my mind was truly blown, which was not great for my dad, was the first time that I saw Labyrinth on the big screen.
And it's weird because it's a movie I've never seen in the theater.
I was obsessed with that movie.
The change from black and white to color, and seeing the change from reality to fantasy.
Jim Henson creature effects, my first exposure to David Bowie, and the MC Escher type look of everything. It hit all my buttons in exactly the right spot.
As a kid, just, didn't know that the stuff I have blurry visions of in my head, in my imagination, could be crisp and clear and amazing.
And it wasn't great for my dad because I think I made him take me to see that movie 9 times in the movie theater. Poor dad.
For almost everyone of my generation, of course, there's Star Wars.
I know a lot of people from my generation will say the obvious answer is, oh my God, I couldn't wait to see Star Wars.
The visual experience of seeing Star Wars, I think, probably is a lot of what led me into wanting to work in a visual medium and become, a comic book artist and a storyboard artist.
And then when you saw the Star Destroyer fly over, it was like, oh my God.
And then from the top of the screen, we have Leia's little ship, pew, 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 and the lasers coming in.
That wasn't my first mind-blowing experience. My first mind-blowing experience going to a movie took place a year earlier when I saw the Dino De Laurentiis production of King Kong. King Kong with Jeff Bridges introducing Jessica Lange and Charles Grodin as an oil tycoon. And when you see King Kong climb to the top of what was then the brand new World Trade Center, and when he's getting shot at by those helicopters, I got so upset. I felt so bad for Kong. That was an absolutely mind-blowing moment that, as you can tell, ladies and gentlemen, I still remember like it was yesterday.
In 1976, I'm 8 years old, and we go to downtown Tiburon to the Tiburon Playhouse, which is a tiny little movie theater, and the movie we watched is Rocky. When he says, "Yo, Adrian," in the ring, as an 8-year-old kid, I was crying. It's like I always knew I wanted to watch stuff, but they were all entertainments. And then going like, oh, art can tap into this emotional place in my body. That's completely different.
I think I was 7 years old, and the movie was Pinocchio. I remember just the imagery and the donkey scene, the whale, everything about the animation, Jiminy Cricket, falling in love with Jiminy Cricket, the songs. And I remember just kind of like as a zombie walking up to my bedroom and just sitting there and just thinking about the whole movie and just wondering about the power of film.
I don't think I knew I was different. It's sometimes hard to become aware of where you are because that's just where you are.
I think that I knew movies were more important than most of the people in my own life really, really early on.
Watching films was affecting me emotionally in a way that it wasn't seeming to affect my friends.
Everybody loved Star Wars. Everybody loved Indiana Jones. But being able to discuss it in a certain level of detail that was not widely widely shared.
I kind of thought that everybody kind of took in what they were looking at the same.
You know, you'd be out on the playground and you'd be on a jungle gym, and that would be the Millennium Falcon. And I remember correcting someone because they were on the wrong side of the jungle gym to be in the cockpit. It's like, no, you got to be on the other side, Ryan.
I grew up in Philadelphia, Northeast Philadelphia, and all my friends were big, huge sports fans. We all played street hockey, we played two-touch football, and just full disclosure, I was horrible at all of it.
And that's also the time when I started to obsessively read and reread comic books and fantasy novels and watch movies over and over again because, I didn't really have any friends.
And I think the realization for me that I had a relationship with cinema that transcended everything in my life came in 1982, specifically in June of 1982.
I stayed home from school because I was sick, and my mother had gone to Video World. I had asked for The Great White Hope. I asked for Citizen Kane. And that's when I first discovered the power of the movie of Citizen Kane.
There was no better month in the history of movies than June of 1982. Now, I say that because there were so many great movies that I wanted to see, and my friends could not be bothered.
And with my group of friends, I tried to talk about these movies. And no one had heard of a couple of those films.
I would get so passionate about something like Pulp Fiction that I would start fights with my friends. My friends were like, it's just a movie. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not just a movie. It's so much more than just a movie.
That period of time was when I rode my bike to see movies like Poltergeist, Star Trek II, E.T., Blade Runner, The Thing.
So I didn't know that rereading the same book 10 times was weird. I didn't know that watching a movie over and over again was weird.
And I knew I had to find my crew, and eventually I did.
And then when I finally started to gain some social skills over a decade or so, it's very hard for me, the people that I became friends with were actually people that were into that kind of thing.
It started to attract friends to me that had at least similar reactions to film, that it wasn't just something to do on a Saturday afternoon.
That was the first time where it was like, oh, these are my people.
We'd go to movies, and then after the movie, we'd go to Bob's Big Boy because they had the breakfast buffet all night.
And sitting around watching movies for 7 or 8 hours wasn't considered a waste of time. It was considered being studious.
That's when I realized I was different than everyone else, all the cool kids and the jocks and all that. I couldn't talk movies with them, but I could with my nerdy movie friends, and it was such a great thing to find your tribe.
And that was when I started to think, maybe it's okay if I don't play these sports games with my friends, because I'm a lot happier going to the movies. I'm a lot happier sitting, waiting for the movie to start.
I didn't care what the show was. I just wanted to be in that theater when the lights went down and the music started.
And I was like, this is my jam. This is my jam.
Movies really are kind of my church. They're my comfort.
My church, my synagogue, my temple was the movie theater.
And the idea that you're in a theater with 350, 450 other people, but you are having a personal moment with this thing that's 25 feet wide on the screen is crazy.
I can't imagine a world without film. I can't imagine wanting to live in that world.
It really wasn't until probably in my 20s that I went, oh, the way I think about these things and the way I break them down. And that's maybe the big part, is that part of what I was doing that I didn't understand was that I was trying to figure out how it works.
When we got out of Jurassic Park: The Lost World, like most people watching Lost World, a little bit disappointed. And like my best friend from high school was like, I didn't like that movie. It was boring. And my sister was like, it was fine. And I was like, I really liked it. I thought it started strong, but in the middle of the movie, they did this thing with the character and it wasn't that great. But then you get to where the truck kind of goes over the edge and Julianne Moore falls on the glass. And it's like, oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for. This is like classic Spielberg. This is what I wanted. But I just felt like you didn't really care about the characters. And then by the time you get to the middle of the movie, there's this plot thread that doesn't come together and this plot thread that doesn't come together. And I think I have some solutions. If you had done this and you had done this, it would have been a lot better.
I think what made me realize that I was different was that all felt just normal,
It was just like, this is what I want to do. And I had no idea what that meant that young.
And my dad kind of looked at me afterwards. We got home. He goes, you should probably do this for a living because not everybody watches a movie that way. And I was like, what are you talking about? It was obvious.
When I saw Star Wars, the special edition, in the movie theaters.
That'd probably be 1995's Toy Story.
My first mind-blowing experience in the movie theater was probably Mad Max Fury Road.
2001 A Space Odyssey, a couple of years ago. And I can remember sitting on the couch with my siblings around and my father, and we were watching Back to the Future, all huddled around this little set. I was totally taken aback by the score, the sound, and just how scary the film is.
My most mind-blowing experience was the Full Monty, 97. I was in a British cinema and we all stood up and applauded at the end. No one shows emotion in British cinemas apart from them.
I couldn't believe what I just saw on screen, that I just wanted to watch it over and over and over again.
I've seen Optimus Prime and the rest of the Autobots in Transformers.
My imagination just exploded.
Mr. Outlaw, John Roca, I'm on your side on that one.
First time going to the movies by myself, I went to see The Sting.
When I was 13 years old, and Steve, you might know this place, is the Cinearts Dome Theater in Pleasant Hill, California, and I remember seeing Jurassic Park opening day there.
I remember when the DeLorean took off at the end and flew around and turned back and flew towards the camera. It absolutely blew my mind.
And that final sting, it just completely blew my mind. I just love the movies.
I am managing a bookstore. I am in the Army Reserves. I am trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. I know I want to be an actor. I know I want to study film, but I don't know where I don't know where I fit. And then I went to see Fincher's Seven, and I remember that I could not catch my breath. That I left the theater and I was walking around the mall once again like a zombie in a daze, and I could not catch my breath. And I just remember walking around going, I have to do this. Even if it kills me and I end up homeless or whatever, I can't keep living this life that I'm living now of possibly doing it. I have to live this life where I do it. That was the movie that absolutely changed me and made me realize I had to go do it. I had to do this, you know.
Pulp Fiction, it was this. It was drawing the rectangle and the rectangle coming up on screen, and it was a different kind of visual language than anybody else had ever done. And suddenly I was like, movies are so much more.
Going to see Fight Club was such a transformative experience because its levels of reality and the way it plays with the filmmaking convention and yet manages to propel you on this incredibly complicated and entertaining story. You are seduced by Tyler Durden and by everything that's happening. And as you're doing that, what Tyler Durden is doing is transforming into something that's really wrong. And so it manages to suck you on board to a thing that actually you really shouldn't like in the long run. And that just blew my mind that someone could conceive of that kind of a film.
Les Miserables. There is a moment where, spoiler alert, Javert commits suicide and the bridge flies up behind him. It was so real and it was so beautiful that I just sat there. That was the moment that I actually remember thinking to myself, if I could make one person feel the way that I felt in that moment, that it would all be worth it.
The most mind-blowing movie experience for me was at Comic-Con in 2010. I wound up getting us advanced screening tickets. It was one of the first times they were showing the movie for Scott Pilgrim.
Oh my God.
So the screening of Scott Pilgrim versus the World, that was
one of the best moments of my movie-going life.
That was a top 5, not just a Comic-Con experience, that was a top 5 movie-going experience.
That screening was absolutely fantastic. It was orgasmic, that screening. If you weren't there, I feel bad for you, because that screening was everything.
Jesus Christ, I get it. I wasn't there.
And I got to hang out with Anna Kendrick at the after party, so not too shabby.
Stop rubbing it in, okay?
They said invite your 10 best friends. I had to actually go. This is so embarrassing. I had to go look it up to see what it actually meant. Because, you know, you're just like, I don't know. You said it. Like, I'm sure somebody that likes movies. Maybe it's something deeper than that.
What does it mean to be a cinephile? That is a loaded question.
To me, being a cinephile has no gender, has no language, has no country.
Well, I guess if we just break down the word, it just means a lover of film.
Art is subjective, and movies are art, so that makes movies subjective.
I don't think you have to be an expert. I don't think you have to have studied things. And I think everybody comes to movies differently.
Most people come into a film and they're going to see a movie or watch a TV show or whatever to be entertained.
My entry point into film was entertainment. I wanted it to be fun.
You know, a casual film goer will just watch a film, let the whole thing wash over them, and then decide I liked it or I didn't like it. I had fun or I didn't have fun.
But then there are these small group of weirdos where that's not enough.
But I think a cinephile to me is someone who understands the basic foundation of film and how it works and appreciates it and is always in awe of it.
It gives you the chills. It gets under your skin. It makes you wide-eyed with joy and intrigue.
So many things in my life has changed, but my love for film has really been a constant, and it's really only gotten wider and deeper.
A cinephile is someone who will dig deeper.
You know, to be a cinephile means looking a little bit deeper.
You know, maybe they get obsessed about how the special effects were made, or maybe they want to look into the background of all the Star Wars characters, or maybe they want to know about the history that connects to the film. It's that desire to go deeper for me that makes a cinephile.
And it's something I didn't do until I started listening to this podcast.
That desire is what the show is based on, and I think that's what our audience is based on, is people who go, all right, I love this movie. Now I want more.
You are not just granted cinephile status because you like a lot of movies. It's more a matter of, can we have a conversation about the nuance and the complexities and the levels of a film? That's a cinephile to me.
What's great about the Cine-Files is they've created a safe place, if you will, where you can just come and talk about something that you adore, even if the thing that you love is not perfect. And what in life that we love is.
You have an experience that transcends what you're seeing on the screen. You love that about the film because it's showing you something different.
And I can take it a different way watching it when I'm 15, and then take it a different way when I'm watching it when I'm 30, and then take it a different way when I'm watching it in my 60s.
Whether you be 15 years old or 85 years old, if you can have a conversation about a movie and show me a different way to look at it and challenges me, and nothing excites me more than that.
I think those of us that are cinephiles revel in that.
What I think it means to be a cinephile is to show love and appreciation for the entire art form and all its variations.
You're watching cinema to make yourself understand that movies are a global thing.
I have a friend who works in costume design. She produces costume awards. And when she sees a movie, she totally responds to the look. She knows every person who's designed every movie. I don't know that, but I know story structure and writing a lot better than she does. And I have friends who have an eye for cinematography that I will never have.
No matter how much I watch, no matter how much I study, no matter how much I learn, I'm never going to learn enough to be the ultimate cinephile.
And I know people who just love going to the movies. They don't necessarily love to critique it the way that I do or that Steve does or that John does, but they just love movies. And I think all of those things count as being a cinephile.
A cinephile is somebody who can tell you who they are by the movies that they love.
But surrender yourself over to the film. Give yourself over to the film. Let yourself be consumed by the cinematic experience. That's a cinephile.
Hi John and Steve, it's Laura from Sydney here. Congratulations on your 200th episode. The Cine-Files was the very first podcast I ever subscribed to, and it still remains my favourite today.
I told this to John and Steve almost from the beginning, that I came as a friend, but I stayed as a fan.
I've had conversations with a lot of people over the years, but I have never, ever had the kind of in-depth conversation about a film like I have had on the Cine-Files. Like, nothing tops the joy and the fun and the knowledge and the discovery, the overall experience of doing a conversation about a film, doing a deep dive, and for however long it takes.
It's one of the few podcasts where you discuss a film in more time than it takes to watch the movie.
To take a film like Star Trek: The Motion Picture and divide it into 2 parts, no one else would do that Only the Cinephiles would do that.
Steve and John allow for discussions to go as long as they feel they need to.
And look at things in a way where it goes beyond just like the broad strokes of, I liked it, I didn't like it. It's every single beat by beat so that you get more into, I think, what the storyteller's intention was.
I feel like I'm having a conversation with Steve and John, which is easy for me to imagine because I have had many conversations with them. But also, I'm also learning things.
It's a great podcast because you get to really sit there and go through the film and see what works, what doesn't work. And so when you get to those final thoughts, you've gone on the journey with both Steve and John, which is what I love.
And it really makes me appreciate film and storytelling even more.
I really like how you guys go deep into the nitty-gritty technical aspects of the film.
It's fun because even as a guest with two people that you've known for a long time, talking about a movie that you've loved, you still learn a lot and you come away seeing the movie a little bit differently.
I love when Steve and John respectfully disagree about something. And even though both hosts might dig their heels in and they're not going to give an inch of ground, there's an underlying respect that keeps the debate healthy.
We were having a conversation about Star Trek the Motion Picture, and I can't remember the specific of it, but here I've seen this movie, Star Trek the Motion Picture, you know, so many times, not as many times as Wrath of Khan, but John said something that just made me go, I never thought about that. I forget what it was, but I'm sure he'll remember it.
And the reason I ask this is because it's very similar to shooting one pilot and shooting a second pilot. And
Oh,
to me,
that is a great point.
To me, Khan feels like the second pilot of the original motion picture.
Okay, let me just pause and just say,
every once in a
bravo.
while, I earn my money on the
Fucking
Cinephile.
bravo, Johnny.
That's what I thought as I was watching this. I was like, this feels like a second pilot.
It's a do-over.
It's a do-over.
That is a brilliant analogy.
That is so great, and it never occurred to me, and that is really good.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
fascinating.
Wow. Great analogy.
Well, thanks, everybody. I'm going to leave now.
Mostly when I think of episodes that are my favorite, they're my favorite because I wish I was on them.
Now, you've asked what my favourite episode is, and that's like asking me what my favourite movie is. It's a really complicated question.
John and Steve have covered the greats. They've covered the classics. They've covered the cults.
I love them all, but if I'm going to pick one, it's going to be Empire because that's my favorite movie of all time.
What's your favorite episode of the Cine-Files? If I had to guess, I'd say probably The Shining.
For me, Chinatown, and for my wife Abby, the Charlie Chaplin Modern Times one.
I think one of my favorite episodes that I went back just recently and listened to was the Karate Kid, the moment where Mr. Miyagi has passed out.
After he's put Miyagi to bed and he's seen the Congressional Medal of Honor and all these things, Daniel starts to leave and then turns and bows.
It didn't register with me, the importance of that, but then hearing Steve talk about it, what a powerful moment that was.
One of my favorite episodes is when Eric Rogers was a guest and did Jaws.
But my favorite is probably Jaws. And from Steve's, really insight into sharks with his documentaries, and Eric Rogers was just a fantastic guest.
There are a lot of people that do what I do, which is watch the movie and then listen to the episode. But there's also a lot of people out there that listen to the episode and watch the movie. And there have been times where I've been tempted to watch the movie, listen to the episode, and then watch the movie again because you guys bring up things that I don't necessarily notice, even though I'm actually 9 times out of 10 watching the movie with the cinephile sitting there with his keyboard typing everything.
So that would probably be my favorite episode of the Cine-Files, although none of them are bad. I mean, you guys are awesome.
When you're watching a film like 2001: A Space Odyssey for the 30th time and you're getting something new about it that you didn't see the other 29 times.
I think that one of my favorite episodes is definitely Shawshank Redemption.
I have the Gladiator episodes and the Ben-Hur episodes. I listened to them while I was at work, working night security at a big resort. They also got me through a lot of stuff when I was going through.
My favorite episode is the Back to the Future double episode. It's the Proto Geek Buddies episode. I love it. I listen to it again and again all the time.
Back to the Future. Information I just didn't know about, and that's what I love about the Cinephiles. It's the information you just keep giving us. Thanks very much.
You know, the knowledge and the research that Steve and John bring to the show, you know, it's really remarkable, and it helped me to appreciate that movie, Shawshank, on a completely different level than what I ever had.
But there are a few that really stick out for me. I love the Civil War episodes. I really, really loved the Monty Python Holy Grail episode. I absolutely loved the Jaws episode, but I think my favourite has to be A League of Their Own with Kay Cannon.
You know, one of my favorite movies of all time, I think a lot of people will say this, is Citizen Kane. And their Cine-Files episode on Citizen Kane was the Citizen Kane of Cine-Files podcasts.
Favorite episodes is tough because honestly, I think they're all good. I've never felt that we've done a bad Cine-Files episode. You can say in comparison it's not as good as others for certain episodes, absolutely, but I don't think I've ever felt walking away from a Cine-Files episode that we made a bad episode.
The first time that I came in to do Cine-Files, I felt like the kid that didn't fully do his homework.
Being on this podcast is fantastic because I get to talk about great movies, but it is also nerve-wracking beyond belief.
John and Steve were like, we want to have you come on. We want to talk about Superman. And I'm like, oh my God, Superman. Like, I love Superman. He's my favorite superhero. I love that movie. I've seen it 1,000 times. I am in. And I showed up and we sat down and I instantly realized that I was out of my depth.
The first time I came in, I was deathly afraid because I know what a great conversationalist Steve is. I know that John knows so much about movies and has a very big personality, and I wanted to be able to hold my own.
And even on days where I'm not feeling it, or I'm tired, or I had a big night the day before and I'm not feeling my best, by the time you get there and sit down, you just get swept up in the moment and you get so excited about their excitement that honestly, before you know it, it's done. And you're like, oh, I'm ready to go more. Like, I could talk more about this. And they're like, no, we got enough. Like, that's a really long podcast. And you're like, all right, well, next one, I'm cool. I'm available.
If I could have a conversation with John and Steve every week on the Cine-Files, I would make the time to do it.
When Steve and John had first started the Cine-Files and they discussed, hey, we'd love to maybe have you on. Can you think of any movies you might want to have on? I think I sent Steve a list of like probably 100 films. I thought I was being helpful, and then I think Steve was kind of like, could you maybe narrow it down a little bit?
Wow, the next movie. I should have had that prepared. As a feeling you were going to ask.
You know, a movie I fucking love that I don't know if you guys have done is Dangerous Liaisons.
Much to John's chagrin, I would like to do the Goonies.
I'm telling you, you guys are going to run out of movies, and we're going to have to do one that I know Steve will not be able to watch. Like The Room.
I am still 100% committed to getting them to cover both Ewok movies, Caravan of Courage and Battle for Endor.
We'll see if that actually happens.
Dirty, manipulative John Malkovich. I want to see Glenn Close getting all kinds of closey. I want Baby, Uma Thurman all up in it.
I think if we could actually get John to sit down and watch it, I think he would actually like it.
Because as bad as those movies are, they are part of the Star Wars canon.
Well, all right. How about a movie that was the Citizen Kane of the 21st century? And yes, I'm talking about The Social Network. The Social Network is a movie I absolutely love to pieces, and the parallels between The Social Network and Citizen Kane should be obvious. They're not. But when we make them obvious on a future episode of the Cine-Files, it's going to blow a lot of people's minds, and I can't wait to have that conversation with Steve and John.
Every time I think about it, we've only scratched the surface. And certainly our fans remind us all the time of movies like, how is it possible that you didn't do this or didn't do that? It's like, you're right.
I want to dive back into classic films more deeply.
We haven't dug into the noirs, you know, movies like Double Indemnity or Maltese Falcon.
The African Queen with Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn.
Bridge on the River Kwai is one of my absolutely favorite films.
Bridge on the River Kwai is one that Steve and I have talked about many, many times.
Guys and Dolls and My Fair Lady and American in Paris.
And some of the Fred Astaire stuff, right? We haven't done Swing Time. We haven't done Top Hat.
We've only done really one true silent film, which was The General from Buster Keaton. F.W. Murnau's Last Laugh is one of the most shattering films I've ever seen.
I mean, if we really want to go super deep, Battleship Potemkin, Ivan the Terrible.
We've only done one Billy Wilder. We've never done an Ernst Lubitsch.
French cinema, so like 400 Blows, or Italian, like 8.5.
And of course, the big one that is the most requested that I promise we haven't forgotten about, we're not ignoring, and that is The Godfather 1 and 2. We will do them, Cinephiles. I absolutely promise they are going to happen.
And I'll come back for anything, except for, like, French movies.
What makes the Cinephiles unique is the way that you guys tackle the passion of all the characters and their themes, which is often more on John's side, I find, and then Steve gets into the analysis and the techniques of how did we convey that emotion. And I find that to be a wonderful interplay and something that really just works perfectly between two hosts, better than I've seen in basically any other podcast.
The thing that I love about John and Steve is that both of them can look at negative things positively and can look at positive things critically.
I think one of the things that makes the Cine-Files a really, really great podcast about cinema is that Steve and John are so completely different.
And you gotta be, because the more each person brings to the table, the better the art will be.
John might be the heart of Cine-Files more, and Steve might be the head.
You know, if you have some person who's a left brain kind of person and another person's a right brain kind of person, then they're both going to be one perfect brain.
This is the granddaddy of all the questions, and that is, what does Steve Morris bring to the Cine-Files?
That is a loaded question. Because sometimes I feel like Steve's married to me and to John and to the show. But mostly it's really good because I see how much joy it brings to Steve.
Well, I'll tell you, we wouldn't have a Cinephile show without Steve Morris. That's the first thing, because Steve Morris was the one who made this happen.
Steve's the intellectual. I mean, Steve is the critical thinking guy, and you can hear how much he enjoys something or how much he loves a piece of film. But then he's able to go in and not only tell you why he loves it, but he has the technical specs to back up his love.
Steve brings not only his background as a director, but just the insane amount of research that tells us things we really never knew.
And really the knowledge of the technical expertise you need to create a great film.
For Steve, it's probably more of a beat-by-beat, scene-by-scene word conversation, because that's how Steve looks at movies. He's a writer, first and foremost. He's an editor, probably second, I would say, and a director third.
And the editing that happens on the show that makes fans of so many people who discover the show for the first time is all down to Steve Morris and his idea of how he wanted the show to be.
My favorite thing about the Cine-Files is actually the editing. It's so cool when you're in the room talking about movies and Steve kind of says, and then we talk about this and Doc Brown does this, or the Beast does this, and then there's an enchantment. But when you actually go listen to it after the fact, and the editing and the dialogue and the music and everything, and the way that like the conversation seamlessly moves in and out of the actual movie and the actual dialogue, it makes it magical, even when it's something that you already sat and had a 2-hour conversation about.
All of that is distinctly important and essential to make the Cine-Files what it is.
He spent so much of his life making all this great stuff that not as often as he would like was seen by enough people. And this is one of the few times in his life that he's doing something that he is intensely passionate about.
He takes our show so deeply inside of him, and it's so important to him.
And it's actually getting heard, and it's also making a difference. You know, I love when I get to hear the little notes and stuff that people sometimes write, sometimes really amazing ones of like, you know, you saved my life kind of things.
My favorite moment of being on that show, if Steve Morris is still laughing, I know things are going okay. That's number one.
All of you who listen to the show have gotten to know John Rocha over the years. But what you don't know, or what maybe some of you can't see, is just how goddamn good he is at this job.
And John Rocha, and I know this because I've known him for a very long time, has a lot of hot takes and a lot of opinions, and also knows a ton about movies.
The first thing is just the sheer quantity of shows he records. It just blows my mind. I do one show a week. I'm exhausted. John does 3-4 shows a day. And he comes in with the same spirit, the same intensity, the same professionalism, and the ability to articulate something important over and over and over again.
The way John approaches the Cinephiles is the way that I feel like he approaches almost everything he does in life, and it is with red-hot passion.
What John brings to the table is something a little more personal.
I mean, I think John is like me. He's an enthusiast.
Not just aesthetically, cinematically, stylistically, what makes a film work, but he'll get more into what made it work for him.
John just feels, and what he feels, he wants you to know.
And then John brings, you know, not only so much emotion and his own background, but just the perspective of an actor.
And I think John, first and foremost, comes out of acting. He connects with films and stories on an emotional level.
I love watching John get emotional about something because he leans forward. He really wants you to understand what he's saying, but more importantly, he wants you to feel what he is feeling.
Cobb is so determined to play it that way, so determined to be right in this moment for his own reasons, that when when that moment happens and he rips the picture of his son, which always makes me cry.
Yeah.
There's such a power in that because I know that anger. I've known men like this. I've been a man like this.
You know what? You're right.
I'm not trying to be right. It's my own point of view.
Well, because, I mean, this is, and again, it's why I think this is good, you and I doing the show together.
Mm-hmm.
But you expressing how you felt, if you felt that, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
That was a real lesson for me because when the show is good is when John and I are both expressing real truth. And so I have always gone like, I got to work up to his level. If he's going to bring it and everything that he feels into an episode, I got to bring the same thing. And that challenge has made me a better podcaster, but it's also made me closer to understanding my own emotions and being more comfortable with expressing them. So, you know, I just feel really lucky to have him as my partner on the show.
Most guys who grew up in the 80s kind of have that relationship with Field of Dreams, and hearing Steve and John get emotional about it gets, even thinking about them getting emotional gets me emotional. I mean, culminating with, you know, Dad, do you want to have a catch? Like, oh my God, just rips my heart out.
And the moment, now I'm going to start to cry because I have to say the line. He said, as he starts to go, he says, "Hey, Dad, you want to have a catch?"
Hey, Dad? You want to have a catch?
That line has broken so many people watching it, and certainly it broke me when I watched it again.
It just broke me
for this show. It just broke you, right?
The great thing about listening to Steve and John talk about a movie is I want to go watch that movie right after I finish the podcast.
The Cine-Files may end up being the greatest legacy that I'm a part of that I leave after I leave this earth. I can't take any greater pride than that in the Cine-Files.
So that's it. That's 200 episodes of the Cine-Files. We want to thank all of you for all of your support throughout this show. There would be no Cine-Files without you. And of course, we want to thank all of our special guests for all of the podcasts they participated in, and particularly for willing to be on camera for our 200th episode.
Absolutely. Can't thank them enough for taking the time. You know, they take so much time to be a part of the show. To have them also be a part of this 200 episode documentary really means a lot to both of us, and certainly to you fans. I mean, I see so many of you whenever Steve's on camera on assorted other shows going, oh, is that what Steve looks like? Well, the shoe's on the other foot for me, at least, and saying, oh, is that what that fan looks like? Is that what that longtime fan looks like? So it's been a joy to see the faces put to some of the names I've seen before as fans of our show. And thank you all so much for being with us for 200 episodes and beyond. We're not stopping this show anytime soon, and there is a plethora of movies that we are going to get into as we keep going into the future.
And we can't wait to dig into all those movies for 100, 200, 300, who knows how many more episodes we'll have. But we'll be back every week with another great movie on the Cine-Files.
"200 episodes. You guys, bravo. It is an honor to be in your company talking about movies on the Cine-Files. I mean it.
Congrats on 200 episodes. This is my favorite podcast.
200 episodes. That is a crazy accomplishment, and there are definitely certain movies that I'm waiting for that 10-year mark to hit so I can hear you guys talk about them.
Thank you to Mr. Steve Morris and Mr. John Roca. You guys are awesome, and here's to another 200 episodes, so good luck to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much for letting me be a part of it, as often as you've let me be a part of it.
Thank you guys so much for this opportunity. Can't wait to see the episode.
Very honored that you guys are letting me be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you guys. Congratulations on 200 episodes.
Once again, congratulations. See you later.
All the best. Thanks.
Best to both of you. Bye.
And I look forward to 200 more episodes.
And you guys are awesome.